All right, today we're going to dive into a question that, let's be honest, probably keeps a lot of us up at night. Am I good enough? We're going to explore this really powerful idea that maybe, just maybe, our performance has nothing to do with getting the help we need. So, let's get into it.
So let's just start right there with that feeling. You know the one I'm talking about. It's that nagging voice in the back of your head that you've fallen short, that you've messed up. And you start to wonder, do my flaws, do my mistakes, do they actually disqualify me?
Yeah, does any of this sound familiar? Maybe for you it's not these exact words, but it's the feeling, right? It's that inner critic that just loves to whisper, you messed up again. You're not worthy of help. And I just want to say, this is such a deeply human, incredibly common feeling. You are not alone in this.
And you know, the material we're digging into today is super clear about this. It says this feeling isn't weird or unique to you. Nope, it's a totally natural human thing. We're wired to measure ourselves, to see where we fall short, and then we just assume that's a barrier. But what if that entire assumption is just completely wrong? And that question is really the perfect setup for the core argument we're looking at today. It's this incredible, almost counterintuitive promise that directly pushes back against that feeling of not being good enough. And it comes to us from the book of Hebrews in the New Testament.
Okay, here it is. This is the central claim, and it's so simple, so bold. The idea isn't that Jesus is our help if we get our act together or when we finally stop messing up. No, it's forever. Unconditional, which of course leads to the big question, right? How in the world can that be true, especially when we feel our own failures so deeply? Well, this is where we get the why behind the promise. The whole argument hinges on one key idea: empathy. The claim is that Jesus isn't some distant, untouchable figure who can't relate. Far from it. The argument is he completely gets human weakness because he's been there. And this whole concept is explained through this really important role of the high priest.
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, we have to unpack what this term high priest even means. It's a really powerful metaphor that comes straight out of the Old Testament, and honestly, it's the key that unlocks this entire argument.
Okay, so back in ancient Israel, the high priest was basically the ultimate bridge to God. And you have to remember, for the people first reading the book of Hebrews, this wasn't some abstract theological concept. No way, this was the absolute center of their entire religious world. They believed that a holy God couldn't just be approached by anyone because of, well, human imperfection. The high priest was the one person, just once a year, who could go into the most holy place and make things right. He was their only way in, their one channel for getting that relationship restored.
So if we boil it down, the high priest's job had three main parts. First, he represented the people to God. Second, he was human, so he understood weakness and failure. And third, and this is the big one, he made it possible to fix the relationship when it was broken.
And this is where the dots all connect. The argument in Hebrews is that when Jesus ascended, it wasn't just him leaving. It was him stepping into that role of the great high priest. But this time, it's for everyone, for all of humanity. And here's the kicker, it's permanent. This isn't some temporary fix, it's an ongoing, forever kind of role.
Okay, that's some big theology. But what does it actually look like on the ground? How does this idea play out in a community, say like a church? I mean, if help is always available, no matter what our flaws are, what does that mean for how a church is supposed to work?
Well, this quote from the source we're looking at really turns a common idea on its head. It basically says a church isn't supposed to be a museum for perfect saints, all polished and on display. It's supposed to be more like a hospital for sinners. A place not to show off how good you are, but a workshop, a place where imperfection is actually dealt with, where people can heal and get a fresh start.
And this really sets up a huge contrast in how we think about value. We are all so familiar with the corporate mindset, right? It's all about your performance, your results, your productivity, and if you don't measure up, well, you're out. But the argument here is that a church is meant to run on a completely different operating system. Your value has nothing to do with your output. And failure, it's not a reason to get kicked out. It's actually the very reason you can get help and start over.
So what you end up with is this paradox, which is the crucial point. A church is supposed to be two things at the exact same time. On the one hand, yeah, it should be a place where you can see a holy, transformed life being lived out. But on the other hand, it absolutely has to be a place where people who mess up, who fail, who are sinners, can feel welcomed and find a way to start again. And holding those two things together, well, that's the hard part. That's the whole ballgame.
And all of this leads us to the final and maybe most important point. If our own feelings of being good enough are so up and down, so unreliable, where do we plant our feet?
What's a solid ground for our hope?
This right here, this captures the entire shift in thinking. The old way, the performance-based logic, is all about us. I can approach God because I'm good enough. We have to earn it. The new logic? It just flips the whole thing upside down. It says, I can approach God because of who He is. It's got nothing to do with how good we are and everything to do with His character. Our confidence isn't in ourselves anymore. It's in Him.
I mean, just let that sink in. All those feelings of not being good enough, all the times you felt like you failed or you've fallen short, none of that is the foundation for your hope. Your perfection, or let's be real, your lack of perfection, is completely irrelevant to the foundation itself.
So what is it? Here's the resolution. The ultimate foundation, the bedrock for our hope, is simply that God's nature doesn't change. The reason help is forever is because His commitment to us was never based on our performance in the first place. It's simply this: God does not give up.
So, we'll just end with this question to chew on. If all this is true, I mean, really true, that grace is always there, that you can always start over, that your failure is never, ever the last word, how would that actually change the way you live? How would it change how you see yourself, how you treat other people, how you face your own mistakes? That's the thought we'll leave you with.